Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
I'm Office Bloke Naz.
Collectively, we are the Office Blokes.
Yep.
It's a true factual statement. Could the US military invade Iran?
Yep.
I think so. There you go. Next. Next.
Right, cheers for that one, guys. We'll make sure you sign up to Patreon.
It's probably not a good idea, is it?
This is a recent video because obviously we touched on things like this maybe a year or two ago.
Yeah.
You know, like could the US invade the UK? And you know, it's a good, healthy debate to have.
Yeah, they are.
Of course it is, yeah.
But I think when you look at Iran and the, is it the Strait of Hormuz? Is it something like that? Is it called?
Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So much traffic goes through there for the oil industry. But you know, Saudi's got that pipeline that runs a full width of the country now. Well, it's not now, but it's been there a while. Yeah, sort of thing. But it's there's so much trade that runs through that route.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
they could cause all kinds of problems, couldn't they? They could block off a lot of issues. But I think there's more to it than that as well. But
Iran have got a legit sort of well-stocked army as well, haven't they? So it's not like
and the Air Force is pretty decent as well. I think, isn't it? By all accounts.
It's not something that's going to fall apart within a week of an invasion. It'd be a proper conflict.
Yeah.
The thing that I always go back to is we reacted to a video about how quick the US military can like set up an airbase and establish forward operating bases and stuff.
Yeah.
All those modular shipping containers that within a couple of hours you've got a whole base, you've got showers, you've got logistics, shops. It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's cool to see.
If this was a hockey match, I'd go with the USA.
Let's do it. Could US military successfully invade Iran?
Salutations! This video will explore a hypothetical US military campaign against Iran. If US wants to change the regime in Iran, it might decide that the ground invasion, however costly it might be, is the way to go. Binkov won't speculate on how likely or how sane such a decision would be. The assumption will be that the invasion will happen. Could US pull it off? What would it need? And what casualties might it suffer?
Not done this channel for a while, have we?
If US is to put troops on the ground in Iran, they're likely to feature some tank support. The venerable M1 Abrams may see combat, clashing against Iranian T-72s, but also against British and US-made Chieftains and M60s. And you can command those and many other tanks for yourself in War Thunder, which is sponsoring this video. It's an online combat game with over 1200 historically. A later video will explore the geopolitics and alliances needed for the invasion of Iran. For now, let's jump right into the battle preparations. Binkov will assume Iraq will not be a part of the US alliance, with further explanation in a future video, which doesn't mean US may not make it a part of the attack. Unless it wants to complicate its invasion attempt immensely, US absolutely needs a land route. Iraqi territory is quite narrow at the Gulf coastline. It's also fairly unpopulated. As long as the US doesn't push too much into Iraq, north of Basra, Iraqi government may decide it's enough to harshly condemn the US invasion but not actually offer much resistance. Kuwait has been a US ally and would likely play ball if US pressed it enough. But it's Saudi Arabia that would be key to the entire invasion attempt. Without it, US would hardly have a staging area for the war. One needs to haul in 500,000 troops or more, and countless supplies. It would be an effort comparable to the First Gulf War, more than to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Of course, months of preparation and getting the troops positioned wouldn't go unseen. Iran would have plenty of opportunity to strike those staging areas with its ballistic missiles, which is why the really close bases once in the smaller Gulf states would not likely be used, initially. US would use the Saudi ports in the Red Sea to bring in equipment and fly in troops. The numerous US air defenses would also mean Iran would not likely venture with their air forces beyond its borders, trying to mess with US buildup. Given the technology level of Iranian Air Force, which has endured sanctions for some decades now, flying such old planes into fairly modern air defenses would play right into US hand. The tables of Iranian planes represent the tallies per mission set, meaning multi-role planes are counted twice. Overall,
a statement you made before about their Air Force being alright doesn't look that great.
No,
not really, especially going off the comments. Awful, poor, hopeless.
Am I right in thinking that there's been Iranian jets involved in the Ukraine conflict?
Didn't they supplied something?
They supplied some to Russia potentially.
I'm not sure if it's jets, but they definitely supplied. But they're in that group, aren't they? Of like psychopaths.
Lunatics.
Lunatics. Yeah.
Just provide them with the hopeless jets and a couple of the awful ones.
Which is still better than what Russia's got.
Yeah, keep the poor ones for yourself.
It's actually a lot bigger than I thought. Actually,
It's a huge country.
Iran,
Huge.
Land is absolutely massive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
I suppose if you think about that Iranian general that was hit by do you remember a couple of years ago, hit by an American strike, and that didn't lead to a war? I think that answers the question of if this had actually happened, because that was on Iranian soil, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was.
I think that's an act of war.
Did they get him in Iran, or it was something?
Was it somewhere else?
I remember it.
I do vaguely, I can't remember the exact
Can't remember exactly what it was. Yeah, the location was.
Because didn't Iran, they attacked a US ship as well, didn't they? And that's what led up to the...
It was a US flagship, wasn't it, going off? I think it was a tanker though, wasn't it?
Is that what it was?
I don't think it was a military ship, I think it was just a tanker.
Couple of years now. A lot's happened in a couple of years,
I
hasn't
can't
it?
remember yesterday.
The overall number of Iranian Air Force jets is around 300 planes. US forces would slowly get built up to much higher numbers, and that's not even counting possible additions from the Gulf countries' air forces. Over the last few years, they included roughly 4 units of half-strength squadron of various fighter jets at any one time. One carrier could also be expected to be present at any one time. Of course, these figures would sharply rise over the months of preparation. Saudi Arabian bases are fairly big, with multiple runways, and could be populated with many more planes. Commercial airports would also be used, as well as other bases farther away. With hundreds of air tankers available, US could afford very long flights to Iran, if necessary. Base on Diego Garcia, a British territory, could come in very handy to the US. While much is usually made of Strait of Hormuz and the vulnerability of ships in the Gulf, US fleet would most likely not even come close to the Gulf initially. Super Hornets operating from the carriers would likely be using in-air refueling, so the carrier fleets can be on the safe side. Iranian Navy is simply not designed for operations outside the Gulf. They lack large ships and large sea-going submarines in sufficient numbers. Their midget subs lack endurance under the sea, and when they would approach surface to recharge batteries, they would be more vulnerable. And Iranian various coastal anti-ship batteries...
I made a crossing there. See the tip of the grey bit in the circle?
Yeah.
See that pink and the pink bit where they think I made a crossing there to go to Bandar Abbas in Iran.
What, on a ship?
Yeah.
On a boat?
Yeah.
How long's that take?
Can't remember.
Nice weather.
Yeah, just straight in. yeah, straight in, straight out.
Yeah.
Same day.
batteries are too short-ranged. Even their most potent weapon is likely not going to be in range, and in reality locating and tracking any target to shoot at farther than a few hundred kilometers from Iranian shores would be very hard. Planes, submarines or ships that Iran might hope to send to scout would likely not be able to go unnoticed hundreds of kilometers over the ocean. Majority of Iranian fleets are missile boats, not designed for open ocean. Most of their ships lack air defenses, and their main weapons are Chinese-designed subsonic anti-ship missiles. While those could be dangerous to US ships, they would need to have targets designated beforehand. US is thus unlikely to enter the Gulf right away, before most of the Iranian fleet is dealt with from the air, from afar. US could bring in a lot of troops, given enough time. 500,000 troops were considered for Iraq in 2003, though final plans used a lot less. This time against Iran, 500,000 might be just the starting point. It really depends on what sort of alliance US could assemble. But even if the alliance is minimal and consists of only Saudis, Kuwait, UAE and Oman for example, it might still amount to some 200,000 extra troops. Saudis would likely not be able to use up all of their troops due to ongoing conflict in Yemen, because part of their forces would be used there. Keep in mind, these figures...
That Yemen conflict it's been going on 10 years, hasn't it? It still doesn't really get talked about.
It's deep.
I still don't understand what's going on, and it doesn't really get news coverage.
Yeah, it's not at the moment, it doesn't. Not at all. But
There's
I'm
reasons
not sure
behind
what
that.
it is. Yeah.
Is it because Saudi's a major trade partner of the West? And it's like just
something
brush it under the carpet, spend trillions on their weapons with us instead.
represent total ground troops. Only a part of those would actually be at any one time inside Iran. For example, only 30% of total US troops for 2003 war in Iraq were actually inside Iraq. Counting in various Air Force and Navy personnel involved, it's plausible US and/or its alliance would wait until they have around 1 million military personnel in the Middle East. And then they would attack with only part of that crossing into Iran. eventually to number some 300,000. Iranian military is large on paper, but not directly comparable to US one. Most of their troops are conscripts, not professional soldiers. Its Revolutionary Guard is a parallel military organization. It's better paid, tasked with upkeeping the internal peace, but also trained for military ops. Unlike US reserves, and especially its National Guard, which trains a lot, Iranian reserves get very little training. Same can be said for most of the US Gulf Allies armies though. So initially Iranians might outnumber the coalition, especially considering they would have a larger mobilization pool. As always, before any serious attempt to send troops into Iran, an extensive air campaign would have to begin, so air support could be provided to those troops on the ground. With all those bases available, US would position several hundred of its Air Force planes nearby. Several weeks of bombing would begin, while US would assess the number of Iranian leftover missiles and whittle down Iranian strike aircraft inventory. Gradually, more and more planes would be brought in, populating even the more forward bases along the Gulf Coast. A huge force would slowly be assembled, first on the Red Sea coastline, then moved via Riyadh to Kuwait. Iran would of course have the option of preventively going through Iraq and invade Kuwait, but that would ruin its position politically even more and might turn Iraq against it. And such protrusion away from Iranian homeland would be hard to secure in the long term. A more likely course of events would be Iran fortifying its position along its border and using the river as a major obstacle to US. If indeed Iraq does not let the US go north of Basra and use its country to enter Iran, the Euphrates and Tigris waterflow would not be an easy crossing. Still, with enough time and firepower as well as air assaults and even amphibious assaults, the beachhead and riverheads could eventually be secured. Due to the need for air superiority and neutralization of Iranian hold on the strait, that might not happen within first several weeks from start of the hostilities. From then on, the battle would be different. While the front line would get very wide very fast, the flat lands would eventually be replaced by hills and mountains. Zagros mountains are a fairly long chain, and they would make it very hard to move hundreds of thousands of troops and their supplies through the narrow passes. Iranian mountain ambushes would be very frequent and very dangerous. The topography would also make it hard to fully utilize the technological edge US enjoys in recon, as aerial recon assets would need to fly more overhead and get closer to the threat. Standoff weapons would also be harder to use in such topography. Just how many soldiers could Iran muster in such time frame is hard to say. Initial 500,000 troops would definitely be aided by mobilized populace, perhaps adding another million by the time US decides to cross into Iran. Major component of any army is its proficiency and its morale. Iranian proficiency would be fairly poor, as most of that army would be mobilized population with little to no training. A few 100,000 troops would have some 2 years of training. Of course, the Gulf Alliance countries' troops don't have as much training as US, and are perhaps closer to Iranians in that regard, and their morale may be even worse than Iranian. But the morale factor is impossible to predict. Back in 1990, various US Army estimates offered a wide range of bleak figures. Those did not come to pass. Simply, there was no way to predict just how much the Iraqis were going to fight for Saddam. Indeed, a lot of them did surrender without a fight. Equally so, it's impossible to predict the surrender rate of Iranians. If most of their soldiers do fight for the Iranian cause, US would be in for a very long and very bloody fight. The mountainous topography of Iran would not help, as a contrast to mostly flat Iraq. Months of heavy fighting pushing towards Tehran and other targets would not be out of the question. Crossing hundreds of miles would be quite a strain on the logistics, and if Iranian morale does fly high, the US coalition might be looking at tens of thousands of dead in the first weeks of the ground war. Indeed, just getting near Tehran might not result in Iran's defeat. Taking such a city would be also immensely hard due to its size, and a lot more of the country might need to be conquered before the country destabilizes enough for a new government to be put in place.
I would have thought you started in Tehran.
I suppose if it's a full land invasion, though, you've got to kind of go from a border, haven't you?
Yeah.
You can't just parachute everyone into Tehran because
No,
it'll
that's
be a
if it's a
disaster.
land invasion, but with the air capabilities they've got.
Yeah. I think you'd want to keep the populace on your side, though, a little bit, because there's a lot of instability.
What's north of it though? Is it like all like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and all that?
I think so.
Guess so, yeah.
So Russia-friendly countries.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, is it still kicking off in Iran at the moment? With
there's a lot of political unrest, isn't there? With
was it the female? She got killed in custody, didn't she? And that sparked off all the riots and things like that.
I'm not sure rioting, but protesting. I would
protesting. Sorry. So that's still going on.
Yeah. It's quieting down a little bit on the news again, obviously for the same reasons as other things quieting down, because they don't want that same shit over here or wherever.
Yeah.
I think you're right there.
That's a good point about the terrain, though. About it's quite mountainous as well.
Very
mountainous,
and
it wouldn't be like walking in the park getting.
That's why Afghanistan. That's why Afghanistan was always an issue for everybody.
Just getting around there.
Iran would be the same.
It'd be absolute nightmare.
Iran's no walkover, no chance.
No, at all.
I think from that region, they've probably got one of the biggest and most equipped armies, haven't they?
Them and Saudi keep flexing with each other, don't they?
Yeah.
So I think it's a big divide, isn't it, between like it's Sunni and Shia.
Yeah.
It's one's Sunni, one's Shia.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
The thing is, Iran was quite. Western's probably the wrong word for it, isn't it? But it was quite progressive, for a country from that.
I think general population isn't it? I think they're quite sort of like Western looking, aren't they? A lot of them.
But it's gone quite fundamentalist in the last couple of decades.
Yeah,
that's right. Mate who lives there. He's stationed there at the moment. But he gets on all right. No drama.
Yeah.
Flies in and out probably once every month.
Oh, my mate Stacey was there only like 2 years ago. She went on holiday because her brother-in-law's Iranian.
Oh, okay.
So they went out as a family, and it looks beautiful in some places.
Yeah.
But then she's like a hippie girl wearing rainbow clothes and stuff.
A few places are quite nice there, yeah.
Yeah.
But when I went, I just went into Bandar Abbas for work for a day, and then come out. Didn't see anything.
That was it.
Saw the office. That was it.
Yeah.
Predicting such events is nearly impossible. If the Iranian government collapses due to internal unrest, possibly mere months would pass, with US casualties stopping at the aforementioned tens of thousands. But equally possible is that a year or two or more would be needed, and that US casualties could go much higher, perhaps a few times higher than those of Vietnam. Vietnam was another kind of a war, where South Vietnamese army suffered most casualties. And both US and South Viet...
I didn't realise there was almost as many deaths in Vietnam as there was in the First World War.
I knew it was high.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot.
Wow. I mean, I don't really know a lot. We know bits about Vietnam, and we've watched documentaries and things like that and videos like this, but I've always been more of a World War II, World War I person when I look at history.
Yeah.
That's bad news.
It's bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're mostly tasked with defense and counterstrikes, not conquering enemy lands. Ultimately, US invasion of Iran might even eclipse US World War I casualties. Precisely because it's so hard to guess US casualties, it's also hard to imagine US would actually seriously consider launching a land invasion into Iran. An extensive air campaign lasting a year or two, if necessary, and coupled with near total blockade of trade with the Western world, would do extreme damage to Iran as well, with next to negligible casualties to US in comparison. The Iranian Air Force would be no match for the US planes, as the Air Force needs bases and significant infrastructure that's fixed and fairly easily kept under a constant stream of bombs. Whatever air losses US endures could be replaced with new planes brought into the region. Iranian air defenses would present more of a long-term threat, simply due to the fact those SAM systems would scoot around and slowly nibble away at the US. Exact inventory of Iranian SAM systems is hard to deduce. The tables presented are a rough estimate. Still, it is evident the fairly modern and fairly long-range systems are not very plentiful, considering the area of Iran which needs protection. With advances in stealth, jamming and geolocation of radar emissions since the war in Iraq, neutralization of most of Iran's air defenses is assured, whether it takes months or a year, depending on how much and where Iran decides to use them. Still, flying over enemy territory on long-range missions, especially if round-the-clock air support is required to the troops on the ground, means US planes would oftentimes be targeted. Even if just a small part of those attacks succeed, air losses would be inevitable. Total US air casualties might be quite a bit more numerous than in recent wars, perhaps even reaching the ones of the Gulf War of '91. That's if no ground war needs to be supported. If combat air support missions are included, US may lose perhaps even several hundred planes, drones and helicopters. The last option mentioned in this video will be one of no support for US war. If even the likes of Saudi Arabia and other countries don't allow US forces and overflights, US would almost certainly not even attempt a serious war. At best, it could use several carriers and some bases far away, using in-air refueling, to do some symbolic airstrikes inside Iran. Furthermore, with sporadic control of the air, or just some parts of Iran, any sort of successful troop landing would be impossible. Moving ships thousands of miles across the sea and disembarking whatever troops they could carry would be futile, as all those troops would eventually get outnumbered and cut off from supplies. Simply put, without Gulf states' assistance, US would not risk its troops. But such course of political events is extremely unlikely, and in the real world, US is assured to come out victorious if it sticks to just an air campaign. It would hurt Iranian forces, damage the economy, and slow down Iranian development of nuclear weapons. But the goal of overthrowing the Iranian government may not be met. While a ground invasion does increase chances of a government change, the risks to the US increase as well. Depending on Iranian morale and US casualties, the war might drag on for years. And in that case, it's impossible to predict when the various future US administrations might pull the plug and leave Iran, if the goal is not yet met. Before you go, try out war.
Interesting, that, isn't it?
It is.
So yeah.
I mean, they're always, like I say, they're always at each other, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, Iran with a lot of people, so like apart from obviously usual China, Russia.
I think in that region, it'd be one of the toughest wars to fight, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, just the size of it, the terrain, everything about it.
Yeah.
Kuwait's a proper like sitting duck, though, isn't it? Just sat there, like, right at the bottom of the. As soon as anything goes on, that's
it.
First port of call.
I was going to say, would be.
But you look at the videos we've reacted to about the US military bases all over the world, and then there was that one about the satellites as well that cross over in a certain way that cover everywhere. I was like, the superiority is there.
Yeah,
it's just whether or not the will's there to fight a war like that and win.
Well, they've got to be a valid reason as well, hasn't they? They can't just overthrow a lead,
and replace them with
especially if you're going to start getting casualties. There's got to be a really, really good reason, which is one of the reasons why Iraq just saying about the WMDs, weren't they?
Yeah.
So that was sort of like the narrative to go in there, really, wasn't it? So with Iran, not sure what it'd be.
Saddam kind of kept these people in check, didn't he? I know
absolutely.
He was a lunatic, but he kept him in check. I don't know what the situation is there.
It's better now, is it? Sometimes it's better devil you know, isn't it?
Correct.
That's what they say about certain countries.
That's what my dad said. He spent loads of time in Iraq during Saddam's regime, and he said, it was the Wild West, and some naughty stuff happened while he was there. But he said, for the most part, it was under control. The dodgy people were the government officials.
Yeah.
But it was safe as it can be for a white British truck driver to be over there.
But keep yourselves to yourselves, and a lot of places like that you think fair enough, but then when you start invading other countries, then that's when shit hits the fan, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think nowadays, if you're an English truck driver trying to drive through Iraq, you'd probably have quite a lot of trouble versus when Saddam was in power.
Yeah.
Realistically.
Anyway, maybe, around that area. I don't know, you don't. It's I don't know. Try Pakistan as well. Anywhere like that. It's, I don't know. You'd have issues. Well,
Interesting.
Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. Good. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.